I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. I am not sure at all what's going on with the intro there, but forgive all of that. I am Jared Ball, your host. Happy to be so. Please make sure you are all signed up at blackpowermedia.org and following at Black Power Media, where the A is replaced with the number 1 in all your relevant social media, and so that you're not missing anything. Including when we go live. If you make sure you've signed up at the channel, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any announcements when we go live, etc. So many things happening, including on the fly, somewhat like this morning, covering the Black Alliance for Peace Haitian Solidarity rally. Hope you didn't miss that. If you're a member to the channel, you will have automatic access to the full stream that went on today, and then we'll slowly roll out segments of all that went on today for everyone else to get to see as well. But just one of the many and soon come incentives for becoming a member of the channel and helping us expand and grow, etc. While I endeavor to make sure one of our guests is able to get here, let me just remind everybody that later today there is going to be more from Black Power Media, which will include a discussion led by, I should say, Doctors Iyeli Ichile and Kido Swan at 5 o'clock Eastern, and for our Black Studies Matters series, which will be sort of a segue fade blend of this becoming Women's History Month. But for the purposes of our discussion this evening, it will be an Africana womanhood and woman. Let me just leave it at that. I don't want to ruin any surprises. It will be a discussion focused on African and Africana womanhood, led by my 2 colleagues, and that is again at 5 o'clock Eastern. And then at 7 o'clock Eastern, right after that, is going to be our Black Power Media discussion with members of ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. So do like our good sister here, become a member. Thanks, of course, to our subscriber here. We appreciate that. We continue to try to do more. So please make sure you support that work. And we'll continue to expand and do the best we can. So, okay. I see my internet is lagging a little bit, so let me just quickly double check something before we bring our guests up, because I don't want to, if I can make any adjustments on my end before we do that and make this a little bit better, I want to make sure to do so. So let me just make sure that everything is optimal and optimized as best as I can. Not sure what else would be the issue. So I do apologize for that if it is to the extent on my end. And yes, indeed, soda is the soda left is the best. Solidarity of dispersed Africans. Let's see, not really sure what is going on with just one more second here while I try to get this corrected, because there shouldn't be any issues here with the connection. All right. Well, let me. I don't want to keep holding off here too much, but I'm not really sure what is going on or what more I can do, because we are super boosted over here. You know what I mean? Anyway, I hope you all who were here live, I really appreciate that, who were here earlier, because it was great to be able to support the Black Alliance for Peace rally. You know, I guess I'm just going to press ahead and hope this will work. I don't want to keep holding up our guests here. Anyway, as promised, I want to bring let me just bring everybody up now. Forgive me, fellas. I'm not really sure what's going on with my connection. We have Omowale Afrika and Dr. Kemet Shockley, who, at least to our audience, somewhat well known, in that we deal with them and their work quite often. Dr. Kemet Shockley, before leaving Morgan State, is my colleague there, for foolish pastures elsewhere. I don't know what he was thinking going to Howard like that. I don't know what that was all about. But
all about research.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I hear you. But he dipped out and is in the education department there. Does a lot on African-centered education. Prolific author and researcher and presenter, and is most recently involved with the series The Movement, which was airing on PBS and here in the DC area on WHUT, which we're here to talk about with Brother Omowale Afrika, prominent activist and organizer based in Philadelphia, and who was on hand and able to just jump right on almost last second to join me, and I'm glad it worked out that way for our segment. But anyway, welcome. Good afternoon to both of you. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ball.
Yes.
So, Dr. Shockley, let me just start with you and get again. We talked about it before it aired, and people can go back and see that interview to get some of the background about what the movement series and all of that. I don't want us to sort of recreate that discussion entirely, but having completed the series and having had it come out, I'm wondering just if you have any, reflections, any initial responses to having gotten it done, gotten it out. How has it been received? What's the latest?
Well, it's been received very well by the audiences who saw it on WHUT, the PBS affiliate in Washington, D.C. And we've also gotten lots and lots of comments from people on our email and social media saying that they enjoyed the series and got a lot out of it. What we were trying to do with that series is to make sure the conversation that has to do with who we are as a people is out there, and not that we're a side item in the larger conversation in our society that is being led by white supremacists and their friends, but that we have our own agenda. We have the things we're thinking about. They're important. They're not, something like Pan-Africanism isn't just a side item and a side show in the United States. There are those of us around the world and in this country who see that as a main dish. Issues such as African-centeredness and Afrocentricity are important for us as people. We need to put those things out front, and that they deserve to even have television time, not just online, not just in books, but that we need to have our ideas on television, on the radio, and Kofi Laniles and I have been on radio and all kinds of stuff. Have the documentary that we did. We kind of look at it like, if we allow our stuff to get pushed to the side, it's going to be on the side. So we're putting our ideas and perspectives in the front. But then we have to recognize that there are lots of different Black ideas and perspectives. So we tried to do a good job, as much as we could, of putting an array of different opinions and ideas out there for the people to see.
You did. You had a lot, brother Omowale. Forgive me. For some reason, I think it's because of my bifocal arrangement. I couldn't quite make out that you also being on Father Time as well. So we appreciate and forgive the imposition. I couldn't quite make out who that was.
No, I
Or
saw
initially what that was. I was like, is that a fly like piece of clothing?
That's an African
Like,
warrior.
is it the African? You know, that's honestly. And then I got the closer look. I said, "Oh my goodness." Anyway,
yeah, I'm on.
no gravy.
I had to bring a +1 with me. I'm on daddy duty right now, but
Hey,
it's all good. She's napping, but I don't know for how much longer.
now we appreciate it. So I don't beyond just even our segment, Omowale. I'm wondering if you have had any farther discussions around some of the I don't know response that has popped up in response to the series. I know I've had a couple that I'd like to ask you both about, but because Dr. Shockley, I mean, to your point, and then Omowale, I ask you, you had Dr. Mbila Shaka on with Tariq Nasheed, which that is where I'm getting most of the questions in my small circles. I forgot the brother's name. Forgive me. Who was with DeRay?
Neil Curry, brother
Neil Curry, exactly. And with all due respect, no disrespect to him at all, or to you or your colleague. I just couldn't watch that. I can't. I mean, I appreciate that you had the breadth of discussion. Mm-hmm. But DeRay is too far for me at this point. I just can't. I can't do it. But Omowale, let me. And that's my. I think that's a mistake. I think that's a flaw. I'm on my end. I think you did what I think is appropriate. I think this is. I'll accept this as my mistake. But Omowale, let me get a chance to get in here. Whether it was our segment or any of these others, what has been some of the response you've seen in your circles?
I think the one that probably was the most electrifying was the segment with Tariq Nasheed and the sister. And pardon me for losing her name,
Dr. Afia. Yes, yeah, right. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think that one definitely drew the most commentary from both sides of the aisle, so to speak, because I think that Tariq has a very large following, on social media, especially with the development of, I don't want to call it a cult, but with the development of, kind of like his FBA following. I was reading through some of the commentary and I felt really bad, for the sister that was paired up with him. For one, with her being a scholar, and a PhD, I noticed that she was very disciplined in terms of how she, refrained or, restrained her argument to the facts. And there were a lot of things that Tariq was saying that, in my opinion, was flagrant, but she didn't appear to want to engage in debate. So it put her in an unwinnable position, by trying to, toe the line in terms of, facts and evidence-based discussion. You kind of like put her in a room with a preacher, and it went, I don't know. I don't want to put too much of my bias on it, but I would say
you're here for your bias. This is a biased space. We want the bias.
Yeah, I would say that one was probably the most electrifying, if that's even the proper term. But I really did enjoy all of them. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of DeRay McKesson, but I did watch the interview that you two did prior to the series showing, and one of the statements that Dr. Shockley made was that everybody put forth their arguments in a very cogent manner, so it becomes difficult to to make the argument that their arguments are not based on some type of reason or logic. So, and listening to DeRay, with even all the holes that I can pick, into his personality and into his politics, it became very hard to write him off based upon the logic that he was using. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So This is Nateri, everybody. She's just waking up. My plus
Right
one.
on.
So
Welcome.
yeah. So but yeah, I would say that the Tariq one definitely was great. I mean, of course, you and I, it was 3 hours of recording that was edited down into 56 minutes. So at one point during the conversation, Dr. Ball and I, we almost came to blows, but
Say that.
Man, thankfully they edited that out.
I would say that.
I'm just joking. But when you look at
They
when you
wrecked the
look at the
space and
edit,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, when you look at the edit was done very well, and I think that the way that the conversation carried, I think that the viewers are going to get what Dr. Shockley wanted them to get out of our discussion. So I appreciate being there.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Shockley.
No, well, I was just going to be real brief and say that, first of all, you all did a fantastic episode. You all had the longest one, actually. You had the longest recording, and it was very, very difficult to edit it because I kept saying, "But they need to hear this." And Kofi would say, "We can't cut that." It was the most difficult edit that we had, because, and we're going to actually end up putting all of it online so that people can see it, because there are a lot of really great gems that the two of you dropped that we had to edit out just in the interest of time, because we only had a certain amount of time with the network. So, but people need to hear the fullness of that conversation. So, yeah.
Well, actually, I mean, despite my own biases and flaws, or whatever they are, I think even with, I think all of them should be seen and heard. I mean, because Omowale, to your point, I mean, I actually agree. If I understood you, I think I agree largely with the basis of it, that there, with all of these positions, there is a logic. I think there is a baseline logic to almost any position. Well, to many, I would say, positions that are taken in the African community. It's for me, at least, the direction in which you go from that basis. So I think a lot of even what I hear as the basis of the ADOS or FBA argument, there is a logic to it. I get it. I just think they go in a conservative direction in terms of their analysis or response. So I do think, to your point, again, if I understood you, Omowale, I think it is fair that even people I certainly, I shouldn't be the barometer, but I think that people that I disagree with severely should be heard, and to the extent that they can get a civil, respectful platform to lay their thoughts out, that makes sense. And then if their thoughts are not sound, if you lay out your argument and it's not sound, the people will realize that. I'm confident in that, and will move appropriately. So I commend you for doing what you did, and I do know a little bit of how hard it is to not only edit stuff down, but to do work in spaces that are not necessarily designed for those conversations. So I mean, anyway.
And let me say this about the Dr. Billy Shaka and Tariq Nasheed episode. It was, I would agree, very, very interesting and electrifying. When I watched the episode, I thought that both guests did a fantastic job, and that Afia and Billy Shaka, sort of on the same stage with someone who it has Tariq's presence, did a fantastic job. But I think that when he uploaded the video to his site, which is what he did, he uploaded it to his own site and then his people, the people who follow him, commented on the thing, and of course they had lots of comments that were positive, toward his perspective. But I did see where someone on there said, "Look, you got to be able to pay attention. You got to drop your own bias in favor of Tariq and/or against her, so that you can really hear what she's saying." Her responses were carefully crafted, as Brother Omowale said, and they were brilliant. And nobody thought she did a better job than Tariq Nasheed himself, because when we got finished, he invited her to come on to his next film. And so she'll be in his next film. And he said to me, "Why didn't you tell me you knew the sister that was like this? This sister's brilliant, Brother Kemet." And I said, "Well, here she is. Trade phone numbers." The next day, she recorded for his next film. So
wow.
Yeah. So not only did Tariq Nasheed believe that Afia and Billy Shaka did an excellent job, I believed that, so did Kofi. And And so did he. You know, both of them did a fantastic job. I just think the people who were commenting aren't, unfortunately, probably weren't able to really um, listen to her with the fullness of their ear because they were busy trying to support him. If they do choose to go back and really listen, and instead of supporting him, just try to learn from both of them, then I think they'll see that there's a lot there that they missed the first time they listened.
And I think just because of some of the discussion in the circles I move in, I think it's also important to point out that her husband was in the room when it was being taped.
Right.
So I'll just leave that there. By the way, both he and she can be seen in an interview at imixwhatilike.org as well. So I invite people to check that out. Omowale, well, actually, let me just ask this question now, both of you, because one more about Tariq, and then I'll move on from that, unless either of you want to say more. Because this is one question that I would want to know if it came up in your discussion or where it comes up. Because now that you've even said that he did an interview with her for his next film, where. And it's not fair that I'm asking you to speak or to explain his argument, but I am doing it anyway because I'm so curious how he, to my understanding, gets. I know he had a previous life, but on some level, his claim to fame is associated with presenting or representing African-centered thought, which is largely Pan-African, and yet he's taken a very anti-Pan-African line now. So I'm wondering where that bridge was crossed. And then I'm now very curious what Dr. Afia's role is going to be in this next film. But anyway, I don't, maybe it's not fair to even ask either of you that, but I'll leave it to either of you to respond if you have one, or we can just move on.
Well, I think that what Tariq is saying about Pan-Africanism is that it's been one-sided. That African Americans, if you will, have largely been the people who have carried the notion that we should have Pan-Africanism, and that our brothers and sisters from Africa and the Caribbean, for example, haven't done their part. And those who have come to the United States, those brothers and sisters who have come from those places to the United States, have done a measure of undermining the African American agenda. The perspective that, you know, what I was trying to get him to talk about is the fact that we have African Americans here who undermine the goals of African American agenda. We also have to understand that if you are connected to Pan Africanists in the Caribbean and in Africa, then you will see that there's just as much a movement in those places as there is here. But just like if you came here and you weren't talking to or getting together with Pan-Africanists here, you would think that no one here was a Pan-Africanist. But you got to be connected into those communities. And, but in his opinion, we'll get further with Pan-Africanism if we start to call out that which Africans and Caribbeans are doing in this country that are undermining African Americans. This is what his idea is. But I think the other thing is, in terms of the film, I think she's already done it. She's already recorded he's got a film called Buck Breaking. And
why are you laughing? What?
Well, she's going to talk from a psychological perspective about the psychological injury to Black people as a result of the buck breaking phenomenon that happened to us during slavery and after.
Okay, right on.
Well, I would argue that when you ask the question about, you know, at what point does Tariq make this, you know, switch over in terms of his perspective, if you analyze, you know, his career on YouTube at least, I think it's very easy to see that Tariq somewhere around in 2018 or 2019, Tariq got swept away in like the headwinds of nativism with like the entire ADOS movement. But I think it was very easy for him to be, you know, swept away by a reactionary formation because Tariq doesn't really have any deep grounding or roots within any particular um, tradition. Um, I think that most of his credibility was lent to him due to the fact that with the docuseries that he put out, he positioned himself very nicely next to some Pan-African scholars. So because of his, be, baby, you got to give me 1 second, okay? Because of his proximity to these Pan-African scholars that we respect, I think that an air of authenticity kind of like transferred onto him. But once this kind of like nativist movement popped up, it became very easy to see that he didn't have any roots grounded within the African centered or within the Pan-Africanist tradition, because he was easily blown away. And oftentimes when I hear his critiques of Pan-Africanism, it's just more evidence to me that he never understood what Pan-Africanism was, so I'll stop there because I don't want to make this like a bash to
I didn't want to make it about him either, but that was one question that was kind of curious to me, just that I was wondering if it came up in any anyway. But Omowale, I wanted to ask you something, because, and I tweeted about this after I did go back and watch our segment, because there were a number of things that I think that were said that was interesting, but one of them really stuck out to me that I don't think I caught when we were doing it live. You said something to the effect that dark-skinned Black women haven't had their pop cultural transformative or shifting sands moment that dark-skinned Black men have had, and it immediately, I mean, when I watched it, I was like, damn, that's deep. And I thought, because obviously in my own life, I remember the key moments in the shift of the light skin bias, and to borrow Dr. Clark's phrase, where my great walk in the sun came to an end. And it was always around, for me, it was always around Christopher Williams getting his butt whooped in New Jack City, which was like the symbolic representation of the light skin getting done in. But the real one for me was when Tyrese did the Coca-Cola commercial on the bus, and when he came that first, when they introduced himself to the world, he was singing Coca-Cola and Smile on the bus, and all the women's anyway started swooning a little bit. I was like, that's it, it's a wrap. But to your point, so like we've seen that shift for Black men, particularly dark-skinned Black men, as you point out, but we have not seen it, I don't think, to your point, we've seen that for dark-skinned women. So like even the darker-skinned women who I've known who have become prominent in pop culture are not necessarily so in that sort of over commercial or sexualized way. So I think like a Viola Davis, for instance, she's not promoted in that fashion despite her obvious popularity. Anyway, so I just thought I would invite you to respond or to elaborate more, to say more about that. Yeah,
definitely. I appreciate you bringing that up, and that observation came to me just as a result of reading past texts. Hold on 1 second, baby girl. Mm-hmm. I really, really need you.
And one shout out from the crowds for the audience. Hey, baby girl, is that Lauryn Hill might have, I would say, may have once been a potential challenge to that, but
I mean, I guess during the '90s, you had quite a few. I guess you would say brown skin where we come from, right? You had your Foxy Browns, your Lauryn Hills, your Nia Longs. Like Nia Long was everybody's crush from my generation.
Right.
But just to go back in terms of like that paradigm shift that happened in the culture, I think that it's best to start this position by making the point that Du Bois raised in terms of double consciousness, meaning that oftentimes Black people, we see ourselves through the lens of our oppressor. So therefore, what our oppressor finds attractive and or ugly, we tend, if we've embraced that set of values, tend to view ourselves in the same light. So as it relates to the conversation around colorism, I remember I was reading Assata Shakur's autobiography, and she talked about this embarrassing moment that she had when she was a young girl about this guy who was attracted to her, and when he told her, her response was like, "Ill, like you're too dark." And when you look historically, that has always been the response within our community, regardless of gender. That if you're dark, it's like like back away. But in the 70s, with this film Mandango, where you get this slave, this dark black slave who becomes a sex symbol, and the white woman then starts to fetishize the black man. Hollywood goes, in this trajectory of darker black men sex symbols. So now that this dark black man is being fetishized in popular media by white woman, he then subsequently becomes attractive to black women because of the psychology that I previously mentioned. But we've never had that moment for darker skinned black women. But to make this argument that somehow black men are only, the perpetrators of colorism in the community is just it's not true. Like when we go back historically, like we don't care if you were a black man or a black woman. If you were dark, it was like nah, like get away, like, and that's just the way that things were in our community. So I'll stop there, but yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
No, Dr. Shockley, you want to get on that, or do you have, because anyway? But go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not on that, but it's sort of a thing I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's kind of connected and has to do with the fact that we have to make sure we don't allow a system of white supremacy to continue to drive wedges between black men and women. And I think it's like all of a sudden, everything is black men over here, black women over here, and it's two separate camps, and they're trying to sort of pump up this up in the minds of some people, almost like black women are a different culture than black men. I don't know of any other group where they're doing that to the group. You don't have Asians being thought of as Asian men over here, Asian women over here. It's black people as one group of folks. That doesn't mean that black women don't have particular issues that they have to deal with, and black men as well. But it's just nothing was said that what made me think it. Is just that I think we got to work hard to make sure that they don't continue to drive this wedge between black men and women. And it seems like they're working hard these days to get black women in some ways to sort of. They're working on black women a lot nowadays to sort of get them to think of themselves as sort of some different group with the black girl magic and all this other kind of stuff. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dr. Shockley. I was going to say I wrote an article on this maybe last year or 2019 called "Black Women Going Their Own Way," and it isn't a black male versus black female argument. It's an argument to show the hidden hand that's driving the division between the two genders in the community, and it's laying out the reason why. Ultimately they don't want us relating to one another. Yeah, because they don't want us reproducing with one another. If the goal is to eradicate this community, then that conflict plays a necessary function and ultimately removing us from society. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and you made a powerful point during the show about how something you were reading that talked about how population is grown, and that because our population in the United States, according to their statistics, has stayed at whatever percentage it is, 12, 13%, that there is something that is actually happening to make sure that our numbers aren't growing. So, I mean, we really are in a very serious war. And this is why we must have the ideas like Pan-Africanism, because we need to fight and we need to win. And we need as many people on our side as we can get. But this seems like the current thing right now. It's a big thing. The whole thing of separating black men and women. Yeah, it's becoming major.
The essay I referenced, the essay that I'm getting feedback, and maybe from you, Dr. Shockley.
Let me. Yeah. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Hold up. What did I just do? I didn't mean to do that.
Oh,
okay.
All right.
I was trying to mute you. Okay.
I think I'm clear
Okay.
now. But yeah, the essay that I referenced was Thomas Malthus. He wrote an essay, I think in 1797. It was called An Essay on Population. And one of his key findings in his study was that left unchecked, populations grow. And he talked about, there being natural checks and balances, but then unnatural checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to ask yourself the question, if you see over a long period of time, an unwanted population is being kept at 10%, 11%, just not growing, then I think that you can reasonably deduce that something is checking that population. And if it's not a natural cause like, famine or, some type of like disease that's keeping the numbers low, then there are unnatural causes. And we have to examine like the policies that the state, in this society puts in place, this new policy driving a division between the genders. Like, why is that in place, and what's his ultimate goal? So I think that was very important.
So I want to definitely make sure, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk with both of you today is because I wanted to both have you bring up and apply your variations of Afrocentric and Garveyite approaches to these problems specifically. Because I think I'm interested to hear how you apply, all of those or those approaches or various approaches to these contemporary problems. But it sounds to me like you're both saying that when we hear reports that the U.S. is about to be quote unquote majority minority, that this isn't a positive, and that this doesn't include an expansion of the Black community. So what then is happening? How is this country expanding its so-called people of color or minority base if the Black community isn't growing? And then why would, yeah, anyway, I'll just leave it there for that.
You're saying, how are they growing? How is the minority base growing if the Black community is not growing?
Right. And why is that a negative? If, and then plus, I mean, we're seeing, like, why is this such an issue? I mean, does it matter? I mean, we're seeing, there's more, I meant to, I should have gone back and found it, but there was an article I quickly looked over the other day that talked about the percentage increase of so-called interracial commercials and programming. But couched in the context that this is automatically a net positive. So it just popped into my head as I was listening to you two both talk about this persistence of the size of the Black community, and that it being by design to limit the growth of that population. But at the same time, we're being told that this country is about to be majority minority, and white people are losing their grip. So
yeah, you can have a majority minority situation and still have white power. I think that's evidence when we look at places like South Africa. I mean, when you look across the globe, right, white supremacy, or I refer to it as the system of white minority rule, is already a situation where the majority of the planet is ruled over by a minority, right? If we want to look at it on a macro level, on a global scale. So it's very easy to apply that at the micro level. I think that some of the concerns in the article, it's funny when you talk about the push for interracial dating. In the article that I referenced or that I wrote about Black women going their own way, there's a part in there where I talk about Black women being recruited as unwitting agents in the reproduction of whiteness, right? And I reference Thomas Jefferson's equation that he developed about basically how to reproduce a white person by mating, with a Black woman, and after 3 passes, right, the so-called Negro blood is removed. But I think that white people are on the fence because we see now. I don't know what the numbers are this year, but I recall reading articles about for the first time there have been more non-white babies born in this country than there are white babies. So if that trajectory or that trend continues into the foreseeable future, we can see just by the numbers that white people will eventually become a minority in this country. But this very country is reforming itself. It's going under that third world individualization, where if you look at places around the world where you have an extremely wealthy, like 1% that lives on the hill, and then the rest of the population lives in complete squalor. I think that America is moving closer and closer to that. So like our urban centers, like New York and LA, will be our proverbial hills, and the rest of this country is going to be getting very bad. And if you look at who's currently being pushed out of the urban centers, it's our people. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't know, Dr. Ball. What I concluded our interview with is that my position is that we need to be pursuing political education and preparation for political disintegration, meaning I always analyze the situation from a war perspective, or from a community that's being warred upon, but I also analyze kind of like the changing layout of the field in which we're fighting on. And when I look down the field, economically and socially and politically, things look horribly bad. So my thing is, how do we educate our people in this moment and prepare them to survive when we get to this eventuality that I would argue is definitely coming?
Just quickly before you go, Dr. Shockley, I just want to just quickly respond to one thing I see happening in the comments. And I just want to say this, D. Stevenson, I just want to tell you, I don't know about the rest of my colleagues on this channel, but if you think we're going to wait until white supremacy is gone before we engage in self-criticism, you are definitely on the wrong show. I don't know about the rest of the channel, but you're definitely on the wrong show. Anyway. Dr. Shockley, where would you like to go with that?
I mean, just briefly, I would say that, I certainly agree with what Brother Omowale said. And one of the things that has been catching my attention is the way that what Black is being stolen away from Black people and being repackaged by white supremacy, system of white supremacy, and sold back to us. We've had people take out our goal. We've had when I was growing up, person was all right. Now you have a lot of people who want to sort of create a different category for mixed people. Many people who we might call Latinos when I was younger were just thought of as being Black people. And now white folks have made sure that they kind of have a different categorization for the whole group of folks called Latinos, and putting them up against Black people as if that's one group. You got Black Latinos inside the Latino group. You got Asian Latinos, or Hispanics, whatever. You got mixed people, all these different groups of people who used to just be seen as part of our group, now kind of taken out. And then when you look at the U.S. Census, they're classifying people in North Africa as white. So what white people are doing is making sure they're getting their numbers up, and also messing with Black allegiance to Black people. So we're really in a situation where they're playing, not only playing with our statistics and our numbers, they're also playing with people's minds, the minds of Black people. We got people, when I was in graduate school at the University of Maryland, I remember having a colleague who said, well, Kim, don't you transcend your Blackness? There's this idea that I can transcend my Blackness. All the complicated ideas and categorizations that we're allowing to happen, I think that we're going to have to take control of not just the narrative, but also of what it means and who a Black person is, and stop falling for these games these folks are playing with us about who a Black person is. So this is, and our connection to Africa. We have to be clear about the fact that we are African people, and we're connected to Africa, and that our brothers and sisters around the world in the diaspora are also African people. Numbers are almost in the billions when we count all of who we are. So the new media is having an interesting impact on who Black people see they are. We've got to get some different alternative images out there, because even though those of us who like to think about these things know better than to get trapped and tricked, my work is in education. And I'm telling you right now, white folks are winning almost to the 100%. With our children, with the adults, and maybe we're having something go on where some of us are keeping our mindset. We're losing tremendously with Black children. So it's no contest. whatever the system of white supremacy wants to do with black children, they're doing it. Okay, and we're not. We've got to see it as a daily war, like something that's happening in the immediate, almost every moment, where we to fight to try to beat the system of white supremacy at what it's doing. So, I've been in all kinds of schools. I mean, I go into public schools. African-centered schools where where my heart is. I think that the work they're doing is the most important. Other kinds of schools, and you can hear the adults talking about how difficult a time they're having getting our children to listen to them, even in the Afrocentric schools, that they're being seduced by white supremacist media and things of this nature. We're not really winning that particular part of the war, which means that our young people, the people who come next, are going to be the pawns and playthings of white people.
Can,
And
can I can I say, and this is not me being biased. I mean, or maybe I am being biased, but I do think that the segment that Dr. Ball and I did together covered the widest range of topics that are like the most relevant right now. And I mean, we did reparations, Pan-Africanism. We talked about the election. We talked about media. We talked about the gender conflict, and it was one other. Oh,
we even talked about ADOS.
We talked about and then we talked about what our definition of like the movement is right now. And like it's funny because just last week an article comes out that after the the public execution of George Floyd, that Black Lives Matter pulled in about $90 million, right? And in 2020. And it made me really go back on a position that I had once took publicly, right? Back in December, I went over to another show on the Black Power Media Network, which was Renegade Culture.
Yeah.
And when I was on that show, Brother Kalanji has said to me, like, hey, I see when you're on social media, you're always going at my son, and you're talking about like Tamika Mallory. And I had made a public statement that, I was going to pull back from kind of like giving, public, criticism in that regard, because my argument was that regardless of how I feel about, a person's analysis or if they're integrationists or whatever, as long as they are doing something that they feel is right, I have to temper my critique with that. But then when that $90 million story broke out, I had to kind of like go back on my word, because I said, man, like if Malcolm would have never told us that King and the rest of the Big Six was getting 800,000 and 900,000, we would have never knew. Like no transparency would have been there. So I think that now when we look at like the national protest movements, we have to start asking these questions. And is it fair for the nationalist community or the revolutionary Pan-African nationalist community to be criticized against the protesters and say, hey, well, at least they're out there protesting. Like, what are you doing? As if there aren't, different forms of protests, right? Because there's no transparency. How does this group that does not represent the Black community get $90 million based upon the execution of a Black man? And then when they start to determine who gets the money, by the way, everybody who's in the BLM Foundation, all the leaders are LGBT. Not that I have anything against them, but when you look at how they dispense the funds, 23 of the 30 organizations that they gave it to were LGBT organizations. So I start asking myself, where is the transparency here? And is it right to compare the work of the nationalist community, the revolutionary Pan-Africanist community, to the national protesters who are being funded? I think in 2019, Tamika Mallory gets $100K from George Soros's The Open Society Foundation. So when we start talking about the movement, one second, baby. When we start talking about the movement, which is what we went into at the end of the conversation where we closed off and we were defining the movement, I think that we need to start being clear in terms of transparency and who's who and what is what, because there is a lot of confusion happening right now, but there's also a lot of incentive to keep people confused, because $90 billion is a lot of money for it to go into the hands of a very small group that is unaccountable to the black masses of our community.
Listen, I struggle with that a lot for years, because I find it to be a tremendous contradiction between people refusing to engage in internal or even public dialogue with certain elements of the black community, and then publicly claiming to represent that community, and then having people be told. I'll just put it, you know, when in terms of BLM, when I reached out to the three founders initially years ago to raise certain criticism, they largely didn't want to talk to me. And then, but if I said anything publicly, it is perceived as being, literally, I was told I was being anti-woman. I had black women that I had done work with publicly criticize me for being anti-woman. And I'm saying, but if they won't talk to me and they won't talk to other people on the black left, which was my point to them in the beginning, you don't do interviews with the black left, then it's not fair to say that we all have to be quiet and can't criticize them. And then, so I was doing something because I have to actually turn in my essay to my beloved Blacklash Africana collective later today, so I'm behind. But I was trying to prepare for it, and I'm looking at what Sophia Bakari wrote in The War Before in the reprinted essay, and there's one thing that really stuck out to me, and it seems pertinent to this conversation. She says that on the one hand, yes, there's an issue with male chauvinism. We get that, no question. But then she also said, quote, the other side of the coin was women who sought to circumvent the principled method of work by using their femininity as a way to achieve rank and stature within the party. They also used their sexuality to get out of work and avoid certain responsibilities. And I thought, damn, I said, now, if I update that for our current moment, I feel like there's certainly a version of that going on now, where femininity is being used to mask what I think are horrific politics, anti-black, anti-male, anti-radical, so on and so forth. And then it's hard to bring up a criticism. So anyway, look, look, we're about to hit an hour, so let me just do my regular time check to just see how you all are doing, and to make sure that if I haven't invited you to say something that you want to say, that you do. But Dr. Shockley, I did want to have to ask you, well, first of all, to respond to any of that and add on to any of that, but also to make sure that I wanted you to at least, maybe tell us again why an Afrocentric approach to education or analysis will be helpful here, and why you continue to do that kind of work.
Well, I think just in terms of what you were just saying, I think that anytime you listen, what's happening, I think, with a lot of people right now, you're talking about some of our sisters who are falling for the system of white supremacy, sort of snake oil, is when you to the system, to people, to the white cultural thing that's coming out, if you're willing to allow it to get into your mind, as opposed to critiquing every word they say and believing that anything they say is a lie, you'll go for it. And especially if they're giving you treats for it, they're rewarding people for taking on a white supremacist opinion. Like blackness, it's like Dr. Francis Welsing used to say, the white hand in the black glove. What you're seeing on the outside is this black glove that's acting, but really the ideas that are in there are Eurocentric. They're white. They're anti-black. Now, I think just in terms of the that's the reason why Afrocentricity is so important, teaching you how to stand in your own place. How do you think in a way that's going to be beneficial for you and your community? Because the system of white supremacy is seductive, and for some reason, whereas I can't trick anybody listening to me, white people can come over here and trick you. For some reason, when it comes to each other, we're very cautious. I don't know if I believe that brother. That sister don't know what she doing. When the system, the white system, the white folks, they can trick, they can lie, they can do all these things. And we only, as far as I'm concerned, have one real weapon to ward against that. And that's an African-centered mindset that says that you need to be able to listen to your own self and not just listen to these people who've done nothing but lie. So I think that I don't know. I don't know what else we have. This is one of my critiques of, when you and I have had debates in the past about scientific socialism and Afrocentrism, etc. I would say, sure, principles of socialism are better than those of capitalism. Yeah, and I would go for that system first over and above capitalism. But we need weapons to deal with the daily onslaught against our thinking. Because the problem Black people have is we slip in and out of consciousness. So that slippage it just causes so many problems for us. Like, we can be listening to one thing 1 minute and understanding how important it is to have that perspective. Then the system of white supremacy comes over with something seductive, and all of a sudden, well, yeah, Biden would be better. So it's a behavior that really I only see African-centered thinking. I see that as our only weapon for being able to deal with that slippage and that anti-Blackness.
So just quickly, and we're not going to recreate that now, obviously, but it's funny you said that, because in that same essay, Sophia Bakari is talking about it's not the empty anti-colonial or the unaware of colonial and African experience socialism that she's talking about. It's the scientific socialism that requires, she says, the creation of a new being. So I would agree with you rather that part of that project is a reconstruction of consciousness and awareness. So at least on that level, there's no rejection of that part of the process, at least as I interpret. And again, I keep saying, I mean, really, my argument is that these camps are much more overlapping than people are aware. But one day I'll be able to. One day, I don't know, but one day I'll be able to either prove it or be shown to be fully wrong.
I think that
and I just have to lay out my argument better. But my point is, I just say I don't want.
That's definitely correct. Yeah, I mean, even the series I think shows some of that.
No, and again, that's why I appreciate what you were doing, even as I admit that I haven't watched some of it because of my own, biases and barriers and walls.
You should check it out. You should check it out.
I mean, I will. I will. Eventually, I will. Brother Omowale, same kind of, I guess, concluding question. And because I wanted you to speak at least some specifically about your approach and I guess method of Garveyism. Where does or how does that approach try to solve or reconcile these problems?
I think that Garveyism places the onus for solving our problems into our own hands. It puts us in the driver's seat, and it makes us look at the world as it is and not as we wish it to be. I think that when we talk about the movement, so much of the movement today is based upon appealing to folks outside of ourselves to do right by us or to assist us in achieving our goals. And I think that the longer we stay in that particular mode of thinking, it puts us in a position where we continue to grow weak. And as conditions worsen around us and get to a point where they're just extremely bad or dystopian, that we won't be in position to survive that type of situation because we have made ourselves dependent on other folks solving our problems instead of using our unity and our creativity and our resource, that being our economic resource, our intellectual resource, our spiritual resource, to solve the problems that we have ourselves. So that's the way that I approach things, and I'll stop there.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I definitely wanted to get your predictions and first thoughts on this. Do you have any on Winston Duke playing?
My position is I don't support any recreations of our history or of our historical figures that are done by Hollywood. The propaganda is always damaging to both the historical figure, but also damaging to the current movement. It always has a hidden agenda that goes against our work. So I'm not supportive of any story being told unless we are funding it, unless we are writing it, unless we are filming it. And by we, I don't just mean like a black face. And when I say a black face, this isn't an ADOS FBA argument. You have black Americans who have black faces, but like I wouldn't want I wouldn't want Lee Daniels telling the story of Marcus Garvey. I mean, somebody as Dr. Kemet Shockley stated, someone who has an African-centered mindset, someone who is centered and grounded in who they are, not just culturally, but also someone who is politically aware, because the politics matter. Because if you only tell the story with the cultural component and the politics are weak, then I think that also, does us a disservice. So.
Well, listen, fellas, I know we didn't have enough time to deal with everything properly, but I want to make sure again that I didn't cut you off from saying anything or making any point that you didn't want to, that you wanted to make. But other than that, if that's not the case, I definitely appreciate you all joining me.
There was only one point that was only one point that I wanted to raise, because the name of the show was The Movement with Kemet and Kofi. And the only point that I wanted to leave with is, and when we look at the movement now, it really is overrun by the national protest organizations. And I think that we have to be honest and start to say, when we have these fly-in orgs or fly-in protesters who are paid protesters that come in and so-called bring attention to a situation, when they come into a community, is that local community made better in terms of the strength of the organizations and the infrastructures by them having been there? When I look at somebody like BLM, who sucks up $90 million in resources, that could have been resources for survival programs. Like, we need so many, there's so much that the local grassroots needs in order to function and serve our people. But you have people that are like these wreck chasers that run from incident to incident to incident, and they suck up all the resource and they leave the grassroots in an even worse condition. We saw it in Ferguson. We saw it in Louisville. Like, wherever these national protest organizations come, they come, take all the resources, are not transparent with the money that they took in the coffers that it goes into, and then the local community is left with nothing in the bag, and we still have to do the work. So I think that that's a conversation I would like to continue to see happening as it relates to the movement.
Right on. Thank you very much. All right. Well, Brother Africa, Dr. Shockley, thank you both very much again. Appreciate your work and for joining us. And we'll look to catch you next time, man. Thank you both again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yes, brother.
All right. Take care, everybody. All right. Thanks to them, and thanks to all of you for joining us during this live discussion. Please make sure you are signed up at blackpowermedia.org and following at Black Power Media, where the A is a 1, Black Power Media 1, number 1, on all your relevant social media, scrolling down there at the bottom. Please make sure you come back if you can at 5 o'clock Eastern, when we're going to be joined by Drs. Iyeli Ichile and Keto Swan, who will be hosting our Black Studies Matters series on Africana womanhood and women, with some guests, special surprises, etc., and so forth. And then at 7 o'clock Eastern, right after that, we will be having the Black Power Media discussion with members of ADOS. So still more come here on Black Power Media, and then more. So make sure you're signed up at the channel. Please click the like button, the subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss all of these impromptu lives like the one we just did this morning, supporting Black Alliance for Peace and their rally in defense of Haitian solidarity, or support of Haitian solidarity. And anyway, so you don't miss anything. So please keep doing that, and join the channel, become a member, get some exclusive content that we're going to continue to grow and help grow the channel as well. Yeah. That said, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, I say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and catch you next time in just a few hours right back here at I Mix What I Like Live and Black Power Media. Peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Oh, my God. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.